Hello friends, welcome to Behind the Shadows, a new way of telling stories.
A group of friends find an abandoned well in the middle of a forest while camping. One of them, defying the other's fear, decides to climb down with a rope to see what's down there. He returns, but something seems wrong. It's as if he brought something dark with him. Little by little, the friends realize that the presence of something from the well begins to affect them, transforming them and making them commit increasingly macabre actions. Highlights: the psychological horror and mystery surrounding the well, with visions and nightmares among the characters, creating an atmosphere of paranoia and growing horror. The smell of mold and old wood invaded my nose as soon as I stepped into the yard of the abandoned house. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, creating an atmosphere that mixed the beauty of twilight with a sense of unease. Beside me, Mark looked at the house with a skeptical expression. "Do you really believe this house is haunted, Julia?" he asked, his voice laden with sarcasm. "Oh, come on. Let's have some fun," I replied, forcing a smile. The truth was that the house's reputation intrigued me. It felt as if the very structure was waiting for us, guarding secrets I wanted to uncover. Sarah and Ethan were a little ahead, laughing and exchanging jokes about the legends surrounding the place. "If this house had eyes, it would be staring at us right now," Ethan exclaimed, making an exaggerated grimace. I laughed, but a strange feeling began to grow inside me. It was as if the house were alive in some way, watching our every move. We decided to explore the surroundings before the light of day completely disappeared. As we walked, the sound of our laughter seemed to echo against the worn walls of the house, creating a bizarre contrast with the solitude of the place. "Look at this," Sarah called, pointing to a broken window. "I think we found an entrance." With a nod, we all agreed to go inside. The door creaked as it was pushed open, and a chilling draft enveloped us as we crossed the threshold. The interior was even scarier than I had imagined. Dust danced in the rays of light streaming through the broken windows, and the scent of a forgotten past lingered in the air. "Wow, check this out," Mark said, picking up a dusty object from the floor. It was an old photograph of a family, their smiling faces horrifically contrasting with the dark environment. Sarah fell silent, examining the image with an intensity that intrigued me. "Are you okay, Sarah?" I asked, noticing the paleness in her face. She didn't respond immediately, her gaze fixed on the photo. I feel like I know these people from somewhere," she murmured, almost to herself. The others laughed, but I sensed that something had shifted in the atmosphere among us. The environment felt heavier, as if the house were absorbing our energy, becoming a silent witness to our fears and secrets. Night was approaching, and we decided to light a campfire outside. The flames danced and illuminated our faces as we began telling ghost stories. "Have you heard the legend of the family in the photo?" I asked with a nervous smile. "They say the daughter mysteriously disappeared and was never found." The silence that followed was heavy, and I could feel the tension in the air. A gust of wind blew past, causing the flames to flicker, and suddenly, the campfire went out. The darkness swallowed us, and the feeling of being watched returned with force. "This isn't normal," Ethan said, his voice hesitant. "Let's go back inside." Ethan's suggestion seemed like the best option, but a part of me wanted to stay there, embrace the darkness, and discover what that house truly held. I woke up to sunlight filtering through the dusty windows, a stark contrast to the unsettling feeling that still lingered. I looked around and saw Mark and Sarah still asleep, while Ethan sat in a corner, his expression worried. "Something's not right," I murmured, unsure if I was referring to the house or my own thoughts. "Hey, are you okay?" Ethan asked, lifting his head to meet my gaze. His concern was palpable. "You seemed a bit different last night." "I don't know, I just feel like this house has something to tell us," I replied, trying to shake off the sense that something was amiss. I got up and walked into the living room, where the table was cluttered with old objects. That's when my eyes landed on a weathered diary resting atop a pile of books. "Check this out," I called, carefully picking up the diary. The others gathered around me as I began to flip through the pages. The handwriting was elegant, but the words carried a weight that felt almost tangible. "It's the diary of the girl who disappeared," I said, my voice faltering as I read aloud. "She talks about her fears, about how she felt trapped here. This is disturbing," I commented, feeling a chill run down my spine. She wrote about a presence that followed her. "Guys, this isn't just a scary story, this was her life. This is just a dramatic narrative. We can't let ourselves be swayed by this," Mark said, though his voice trembled slightly. It was at that moment that a quick shadow passed by the window, and we all turned in the same direction. It was just a trick of the light, I'm sure. Ethan tried to divert the attention. But the tension in the air was palpable. Let's check out the attic, I suggested, trying to ignore the feeling that we were being watched. We climbed the creaking stairs, and each step seemed to amplify the groan of the wood beneath our feet. When we reached the attic, the atmosphere was dense, laden with a history that felt like it wanted to consume us. We found more objects, an old doll, with an enigmatic smile that sent shivers down my spine. "Look at this," Sarah said, picking up the doll. The moment her fingers touched its cold surface, she turned pale, her eyes bulging. "Sarah? Are you okay?" I asked, but she didn't respond. Suddenly, she collapsed, falling heavily to the floor. "Sarah!" I yelled, rushing to her. When she came to, her gaze was distant, as if she was somewhere else. I saw the girl. "In the photo," she whispered, and a heavy silence hung over us. "What do you mean?" Mark asked, his voice low, but the tension was rising. "What did you see, Sarah?" She sat up, still dazed, and looked at our faces. "She was calling me. I feel like she wants something from us." The discussion quickly escalated, and the idea that we were in a situation much larger than we had anticipated began to weigh on us. What had started as a fun adventure was turning into something terrifying, and I knew we needed to act before the house decided to reveal all its secrets. The tension hung in the air as I watched Mark, his eyes glinting with defiance. "Julia, you can't be serious. We're going to leave just because you had a nightmare? This is just a story. A legend made up to scare kids," he retorted, crossing his arms. "You don't understand." Sarah fainted. "Something is wrong here, and I don't want to stay to find out what it is." I stared at him, trying to convey the urgency of the situation, but he seemed immune to the fear that surrounded us. "And what if we leave and nothing happens? We'll just be running away from something that doesn't exist." Mark insisted, his tone challenging, but there was an unease in his voice that I couldn't ignore. "It's easy for you to say that. You didn't see what Sarah saw." I was nearly shouting now, feeling frustration rise like a volcano ready to erupt. "You don't know what this house can do." Sarah, who was sitting in the corner, still pale and wide-eyed, tried to intervene. "Guys, maybe we should just leave. I don't feel well, and this house, it scares me." Her voice trembled, and I could see the weight of her experience in her words. Ethan, always the mediator, tried to calm things down. "Look, how about we stick together? If nothing happens by morning, we'll leave. It might just be our imagination. What do you all think?" He looked at each of us, seeking approval. Mark hesitated, but the idea of spending the night in the house without further debate seemed the most logical. "Fine. But if nothing happens by morning, I'm out. You guys will hear me." So, we decided to stay. The house felt like it was watching us, its old walls heavy with stories, and soon we began to hear whispers. It was as if the walls were speaking, sharing secrets we were never meant to know. "Did you hear that?" Ethan asked, raising his camera. "I'm going to film everything. If we need to prove something, let it be with evidence." As he moved around the room, capturing every dark corner, a door slammed shut on its own with a bang that echoed through the space. My heart raced in my chest, and I looked at my friends. "Did you hear that?" Julia's voice was almost a whisper. "Yes, it was the door," Sarah exclaimed, her face horrified. "We're doing something wrong. No, this is just a trick of the house. Let's keep going. We can't let this defeat us." Mark tried to sound confident, but his voice trembled. Ethan was still filming, but when he reviewed the footage, his expression changed completely. "Wait, come back here," he shouted, freezing us all in our tracks. "Look at what I just saw." The atmosphere grew heavy, and we all gathered closer to see what he had captured. What should have been a night of fun had turned into an unexpected nightmare. The only certainty we had was that inside, the house held more secrets than we were ready to face. I felt my heart race as we tried to open the front door, only to discover it was locked. "What's happening?" Mark exclaimed, banging on the fragile wood in frustration. The tension between us was palpable, as if the air was charged with electricity. "This can't be real," I shouted, trying to keep my composure. "Come on, guys, there has to be another way out." Sarah, still pale and trembling, looked at me with wide eyes. "I told you the house wouldn't let us go. It wants us to stay." Her voice was weak, but the certainty in her words made my stomach churn. You're just scared, Sarah. There's no way the house wants anything, Ethan replied, trying to sound confident, but his voice faltered. Determined not to let panic take over, I suggested we explore the basement. If we can't get out this way, maybe there's another exit down below, I said, walking towards the staircase that led into the dark underground. I'll go with you. Mark followed me, while Ethan and Sarah hesitated. We need to stick together. We can't separate now, I insisted. As we descended the stairs, I was met by a cold, damp air. The walls were covered in mold, and the smell of rotting wood filled my nostrils. With a flashlight in hand, I illuminated the space and soon noticed a pile of diaries in one corner. Look at this, I exclaimed, drawing everyone's attention. As I flipped through one of the diaries, fear began to transform into curiosity. The pages revealed the fears and experiences of the missing girl. She felt trapped here too, I murmured, sharing the words with the others. She had friends, but they left without explaining. That's strange, Mark said, stepping closer. Who were those friends? Why did they leave her? The question hung in the air, and the weight of the situation began to press down on us even more. Suddenly, we heard a noise coming from above. What was that? Ethan asked, his voice trembling. The atmosphere was thick, and fear started to seep back into our hearts. I think we need to go back, Sarah whispered, looking around as if she was expecting something or someone to appear. Calm down, let's get out of here. We need to come up with a plan. I tried to keep my voice steady, but a part of me was in despair. As we made our way back up, I realized that whatever was happening there was deeper than we had imagined. The more I delved into that story, the more I felt that we were all connected to that house in a way we still couldn't comprehend. The discussion about how to break a window started between Mark and Ethan, but I could barely hear them. I could only think about what I had read and the growing sensation that something was about to happen. Then, suddenly, Sarah let out a scream, her gaze fixed on a point behind us. The girl. She's here again. The figure of the girl became increasingly clear, her delicate features standing out in the dim light of the room. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized she didn't seem threatening, but rather, sad. What do you want? I asked, my voice trembling. Her gaze locked onto mine, as if she were trying to convey a message. Julia, can you see her? Mark whispered, his eyes wide. She's trying to communicate. Yes, but how? I replied, my heart racing. Suddenly, the ground began to tremble, causing all of us to hold onto the walls of the room. The sound of creaking floorboards echoed, and I could feel the pressure in the air increasing. Let's split up. We need to find a way out. Sarah shouted, her voice filled with desperation. We can't stay here. Nodding in agreement, I said, okay, but be careful. Don't stray too far. Each of us took a different direction, and the feeling of solitude settled in as I moved away from my friends. I searched through the rooms, noticing details I hadn't seen before. The walls were covered in stains, almost as if they were weeping. The sensation of being watched intensified, and whispers seemed to grow louder, murmuring secrets I couldn't understand. Suddenly, I came across an old wardrobe. When I opened it, I found more dusty diaries. One was open, and the words seemed to leap off the page. Only a spell can free her, the text said, and my heart raced. Free her? I murmured, thinking about the girl. Julia, are you there? Ethan's voice echoed from somewhere far away, and I needed to find him. But before I could leave, something held me to that page. The spell might be the answer, but how could I perform it? I can't leave her here, I thought, determination swelling inside me. She needs help. At that moment, an idea struck me. If I followed the instructions, maybe I could do something. But what would happen if the house didn't like my attempt? The house shook again, as if it were aware of my plans, and a scream echoed throughout the place, sending chills down my spine. Julia. Ethan's voice was closer now, but I couldn't stop. The need to free the girl was stronger than my fear. Please, help me, I whispered, looking at the figure that still stood there, waiting. I'll try. The tension mounted, and I knew I had to decide quickly. The atmosphere in the house was heavy, as if the air was charged with electricity, and the ritual we were attempting to complete seemed to make everything around us tremble. The figure of the girl had materialized before us, but to my surprise, it was Sarah being revealed. She looked older, but the features were unmistakable. My heart raced. Sarah? Is that you? I asked, my voice trembling. She looked at me, her eyes filled with confusion and pain. "I don't know what's happening, Julia. What does this mean?" The house groaned in the background, the walls creaking as if they were listening to our conversation and disapproving of what they were hearing. "We need to continue. We need to complete the ritual," Mark shouted, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. I knew he was right, but the revelation that Sarah had such a deep connection with the house left me paralyzed for a moment. How was this possible? The house wasn't just a sinister place, now it seemed to have a direct connection to one of us. The figure of the girl, now clearly an older version of Sarah, reached out her hand, and a sad smile spread across her face. "I've waited so long for this moment. But I don't know if I can go. Something holds me here." The desperation in her voice sent a chill down my spine. "You can't stay here," Ethan intervened, but his voice sounded weak in the face of the enormity of what was happening. "You need to choose, Sarah." The house began to crumble even more, chunks of wood and brick falling around us. I knew we needed to act quickly. "Sarah, if you are the reincarnation of the girl, you have the power to break this cycle," I shouted, trying to gather every ounce of courage I had left. "But what about you? What if I'm the reason we're trapped?" Sarah asked, her expression contorting in doubt and fear. "You're not the reason," I said, trying to convince her. "We are your friends, we're here. Together, we can escape." The older girl's smile seemed to shine with its own light. "You must decide, Sarah. Stay and face what's here, or go and finally be free. Choose," Julia shouted, as the structure of the house continued to tremble, as if it were about to swallow us whole. The chaos around us was deafening, but the girl's voice echoed in my mind. "You have to decide now." The urgency was palpable. I looked at Sarah, hoping she would make the right choice, but time was running out. "Sarah, you're not alone. We're with you." In that moment, her gaze locked onto mine, and I could see a spark of hope ignite. I don't want to be trapped here." "Then come with me," I shouted, reaching out my hand to her. The house began to crumble around us, and I knew that Sarah's choice wouldn't just affect her life, but the fate of all of us. "Sarah, choose between staying or leaving."
Leave your comment and subscribe to the channel. Enjoy and see other stories on the channel. See you in the next story, if you dare.